my boss, who happened to be my brother-in-law, said, "Hey kid, on the way back, see what she can do." So I did, and everybody was along the side of the freeway with me, and then I floored it. It felt like I was the fastest runner in the world, man. Like I was at the Olympics and I'd beat the whole world by 10 lengths. You felt you felt the power of the turbo kick in, and it would shoot your head back, and then you just took off to the point where you got scared, and I let off the acceleration. I was like, "Whoa, that was almost a little too much," but I'll never forget that.
Nissan Skyline GT-R R32. A place to start with a car like this is sort of its legendary racing status. It was produced in the late part of 1989, and it was the first Japanese production car to compete in the series it was racing in and win for 2 years straight. It didn't lose a single race in the first 2 years it was campaigned, and that's a feat that still hasn't been repeated today by any manufacturer. Now, there's a few questions on why is that significant? Why is this a big deal? I mean, obviously winning is cool, but what does that translate to into the end user product? It was a very ahead of its time vehicle. It obviously has individual throttle bodies on the intake manifold instead of a traditional singular butterfly. It's a twin turbo engine, which was kind of the sort of the start of that era of things. There were a few Toyotas that came twin turbo before it, older chasers and whatnot, but this particular engine utilized the new ceramic turbine wheel, which was lighter and spooled faster, and they really did a lot to that car to kind of try and push the boundary with it. It was one of the last vehicles that was designed basically by hand. They had computer systems for developing suspension geometry, but it was sort of one of the last of the Nissan marquee that was done by hand, and after they got a little bit more advanced with computers, they looked at the geometry and noticed that they had some issues with it. This was created as the lineup continued onto the 33 and 34. There's kind of pros and cons to all the different models of the current generation GTRs. They kept getting heavier and slightly larger. From a tuning car standpoint, the 32 is sort of the backyard's favorite because it's the lightest. Weight is the ultimate enemy, whether you're trying to go fast in a straight line, turn, stop, anything. Weight is sort of not your friend. Sort of, another one of Nissan's big things where you look through the manual and there's 30 acronyms, and it's like, what does all this kind of stuff stand for? I think they actually ran out of words for the technology they were developing, simply obviously because it hadn't existed yet. They're also trying to come to terms with how to market something. I think they did a really good job of trying to figure out how not only to brand and market the technology that was available at the time, but also making it something that's cool and almost iconic in itself. It's people are obsessed, with the really basic stuff like dual overhead cam, DOHawk, and single overhead cam, SOHawk, and it's sort of become almost like a cultural thing when you're like listing a car for sale or when you're searching for stuff. These acronyms are almost as big of a part of the search for the car as the car itself. And so I think my favorite part about the era was really what everybody brought to the table as far as like, what is the special options on this car, and what are the acronyms that are associated with it, and what do they kind of do, and how do they compete with the next best manufacturer. I feel like Nissan's engines were very well thought out, but I feel like they were a little bit behind the boat. Toyota had Yamaha on board, and they helped develop the 3S GTE and the Beams engine, which is in like the Celica Alltracks, the MR2s, and the Japanese model IS200. The Supra and all the chasers and whatnot had the 1JZs and 2JZs, and I feel like they just sort of had a little bit better handle on the engine technology. But as far as Nissan being the forefront of how to put the power to the ground, I feel like they absolutely mopped the floor with everybody for a number of years, and it's very apparent in all of the racing pedigree with all of their cars. I mean, you look at anything from, the 90s, and Nissan was top 5 on every single grid of every single race, pretty much ever, except for, obviously, DNFs. Let's take a moment to really appreciate what the Nissan Skyline is as a vehicle. The particular model that they have is called the GTS-4. It came with the RB20 DET engine, which came in all of the rear-wheel drive models as well. And this one in particular, which used the same transmission and rear differential and all-wheel drive system and the ATTESA system that its bigger brother, the GTR, used. So this was sort of the, I would guess you would say, cost-effective solution to buying into all of the best technology that Nissan offered. The RB20 motors came single turbo, whereas the GTR was twin. So for a street car, the RB20 is probably a little bit more fun to drive. The turbos come online a little bit sooner, but you still have all that great utilization of what the transmission and whatnot can do. So it's quite a rare car in itself. They didn't build a whole lot of them, so production number wise, it's probably less of the GTS4s than there are of the actual GTRs. And it's kind of a unique piece of history to own. It's sort of like the underdog to the big brother, but there's nothing that it's really lacking. You know, there's plenty of aftermarket support for both engines, the 20 and the 26. The 26 obviously sort of has the marquee name for being like the big power Godzilla, but I wouldn't underestimate the GTS-4 model for being any sort of a slouch. You can definitely make them as fast as you'd care to make them. If you want to put the 25 or the 26 into it, it bolts right in. And I think this car is for someone who is looking for, you know, something that's quite collectible and original and unmolested. This is a pretty good example of something that you're not just going to go find in every parking lot and every one that's been brought to the US. This car is rust-free as far as that I can tell, and everything on it works, and it's in very immaculate condition. The interior is flawless, the outside is quite nice, and mechanically it doesn't need anything, and it's getting pretty hard to find as they're becoming more popular. Obviously in America and the rest of the world, we have some pretty stringent import laws at 25 years old, so I really feel like cars like this one, you know, in 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're kind of going to be valued in a different way. It's not going to be so much a Skyline GTS-T or GTS-4 is worth, let's say, 10 to 14,000 or 15,000 or whatever the higher end mark of that is. It's going to be come back down to the conditions of the vehicle, and I think you're going to see a much broader spread, whereas something that's more of a daily driver you're going to see kind of on the lower range, and something like this car that's more of a collectible is really going to start holding on to its value simply because there's just not that many of them available. So I feel like this car is really kind of a unique piece of history that you can actually afford. The problem with the GTRs is they're still so expensive. I mean, they sell for almost what the original MSRP was, whereas this car being at, you know, 14, 15,000 range, it's a chance to really get into kind of the pinnacle of what the whole Japanese culture is about. I mean, when you think of Japan, you think of Godzilla, regardless of the car scene, and that's what this car was named after because it was such a monster on like the racetrack and all of the winnings that I was telling you about earlier. So this car really is a unique piece of history, and it's affordable and obtainable.
So guys, go ahead and come on into Tim Dahle. We've got the best customer service in the state. We've got a massive used and new car inventory, and we'll be happy to help you out. And we'll make sure that you're in a car that you love for a price that's right for you.
We've been around as long as the Skylines and GTRs. I think 1969 is when Tim's dad, Klein, started this dealership. I've actually been here since 1994, so that's 24 years as a salesperson, so pretty much my entire adult life, and I'm just a Nissan nut through and through. The service guys, the parts guys, a lot of the sales guys have been here for a long time. If you're looking for a dealership that understands the Nissan Datsun heritage, definitely Tim Dahle Nissan and Murray's the place to come.
People with international driver license, we have an amazing program for financing. We can help you to get any car you guys want, SUVs, trucks. We've been on the store in this location for 43 years, and it's an amazing location. Just come and see us and see what we can do to help you to get into a new car, okay? Thanks.
The reason why you want to come buy a car at Tim Dahle Nissan, number one, when you know the history of Tim Dahle Nissan, they've been here just as long as everybody else for the last 50, 60 years. They've sold thousands and thousands of Nissan cars, which the manufacturer makes a really good car that lasts a very long time, that's built well. The reliability is there. It's a great place to buy a car. The prices are as low as I've seen anywhere, which essentially that's kind of the major motivating factor for everybody initially. And so once you got past the price, our product, our people, our establishment, that's the easy part and that's the best part.